Is the universe 6,000 years old or 13.8 billion? Today I'll explain why this, one of the hottest debated questions in Christianity, it doesn't matter at all. Not that it's not an interesting question worth studying, but it's actually not relevant to daily Christian life. I was kind of surprised to find that a lot of my favorite Christian apologists and theology personalities online, they're almost all theistic evolutionists. People like Trent Horn, William Lane Craig, Redeem Zoomer, they're all theistic evolutionists, which means they believe in God, but they also believe in the theory of evolution. And so this video will be strictly about theistic evolution versus theistic young earth. I'm not even going to touch on atheistic theory of evolution. So just people who are Christian specifically and believe that the theory of evolution happened, or they believe in the young earth creation story. So this video has 5 parts. The arguments for evolution, the arguments against it, arguments for the young earth, arguments against it, and why ultimately it doesn't matter. So the arguments for the theory of evolution. So the theory of evolution is that the universe is something like 13.8 billion years old, and that living creatures evolved from other living creatures, and then, that eventually gets us to where we have man today. So everything started with like single cell organisms, which evolved into multi-cell, which evolved into like some plants, which evolved into like fish and stuff, then land creatures, then monkeys, and etc. Eventually you get us. And depending on who you ask, the theory says that mankind as we know him today has been around on planet Earth for somewhere around 50 to 200,000 years is what I hear. So does the theory of evolution contradict the Bible? It actually not necessarily. It does not necessarily contradict the Bible. The first verse that theistic evolutionists like to refer to is in Peter, when Peter says that like a minute to God is like nothing, and like a billion years is also like nothing, because he's God and he's not bound by time. Also, I'm reading some C.S. Lewis right now, and C.S. Lewis is talking about the use of metaphor in the Bible and in everyday description. And the point he makes is actually very true, is that we cannot actually write without using metaphor. We have to use it, which is the interesting thing. Like, for example, at the baptism of Jesus, the Holy Spirit was not a dove, and the people who saw it had no idea how to describe it. So the Holy Spirit descends on Jesus when he's baptized, and so they just say like a dove, because they have nothing to compare that experience to. And so the argument is that potentially there is no way to really grasp what it was like when God created the universe. So Moses, who would have written Genesis, or maybe the traditions about the theory of the creation of the universe, they would have divided it into 6 days as a metaphor, because there's no way they could have comprehended it. In that way, the theory of evolution does not contradict Genesis. The final argument, and this is actually a very true point, is it needs to be noted that the Bible is not a science textbook. We look at the Bible sometimes expecting it to give us answers to scientific questions, but it's not. Like if someone claims that the resurrection of Jesus is a hoax because people don't rise from the dead, or any of Jesus' miracles, it's not possible because it's not scientifically possible. No one has ever claimed that it was scientifically possible. We've always claimed that it was a miracle. So we need to make that distinction. And in the same way, the creation of the universe is absolutely miraculous. Now here are the arguments against the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution is actually somewhat ridiculous. The theory is constantly changing, which is okay because science always improves our other science. As we get more data and more evidence, we adjust our previous theories. But I've never really heard the same number about anything from 2 people. So that's the first part, is that there's not always a consistent idea of the numbers at the age of things. Next, if modern day man did evolve from apes, like this famous picture, we would expect to find fossils of all these phases in between. And given that they dig up fossils that they presumably date to millions upon millions of years ago, one would think it's highly plausible that fossils of half man, half ape creatures existed somewhere. However, this image is the best idea or evidence that has been put forward of these middle stages. This is their best evidence. There's one thing that could look a little bit, it could go either way. It's just an ape with a little deformed skull. So there's a lot of data that you would presume to see if the theory of evolution is true, and you just don't really see that. Finally, it's so easy to misinterpret evidence. I really came upon this conclusion in like 2020, when during that summer there were all those riots over the George Floyd thing and all the BLM protests, and we all saw the same video of what happened to George Floyd, but for whatever reason, people on either side of the aisle came to different conclusions. And that's when it dawned upon me that 2 people can look at the same evidence and come to different conclusions. In the same way, when we look at the evidence of the things around us, like the natural world, and we try to make guesses about things that happened billions upon billions of years ago, we're prone to some error. So check out this video really quickly on misinterpreting evidence.
Well, Colette, this is the crater that stopped Dave Kennedy in his tracks yesterday when, as you say, he was walking his beach here along Portmarnock Beach in Dublin. We're joined by Dave now. Dave, tell us, what was your reaction when you came across this?
Complete shock, to be honest. I was walking along just with the dog and came across the impact site. Fortunately enough, I love space and exploration and astrophysics, so I was a bit surprised when I saw it, but I knew immediately that it was an impact site. And then lo and behold, right in the middle of it was the rock.
Tell us about this rock. What about it made you think that this has to be a meteor strike?
So I noticed by the way it came in and where it was landed, it had created the big mound around, so that was everything from the inside that was blown out. But it's just the actual weight of it and its density. You're definitely going to have to get it checked to see what it's made of.
This is a suspected meteor strike here in Portmarnock in County Dublin.
Now, finally, this lunchtime, the mystery of the hole on the North Dublin beach has apparently been solved, denting the hopes of a local space enthusiast who had hoped it was the site of a meteor strike. But footage emerged last night.
Now, if we can't make accurate predictions about a guy playing with sandcastles on the beach 2 days ago, do you think that the predictions we make today about what we observe scientifically is accurate about the things that happened billions upon billions of years ago? Of course, no evolutionist is arguing that the theory of evolution is airtight. It's called the theory of evolution because it's a theory. But I think that margin for error is much bigger than evolutionists want to say it is. I think there's a whole lot of problems and a lot of potential error there. And one of the biggest problems of the theory of evolution is the assumption of consistent rates. So I was at these like bat caves in San Antonio, and it's these caves that are supposedly many millions of years old, and there's these formations that are have been drops of sediment that have slowly accumulated, and scientists have observed the rate at which the sediment builds. And at the rate that it's currently building, it would have to be millions upon millions of years for them to get as tall as they are. So that is one theory that, yeah, this necessitates that there has to have been millions of years for these things to form. However, the presumption is that the rate has always been the same, which is impossible to know because we've only been observing these caves in San Antonio for something like 60 years or something. Here's the arguments for the young Earth. Most geological mysteries, like Grand Canyon, they can be answered relatively easily with the flood in Genesis. The eruption of Mount St. Helens a little while back, it didn't prove the young Earth creationist theory, but it was a proof of concept that volcanoes and floods could, in minutes and hours, cause these massive geological changes that would take millions upon millions of years if it was just normal things. And so after the flood, there would have been obviously massive flooding, massive supervolcanoes, and massive geological changes, which is to say that things like the Grand Canyon and other massive geological mysteries could easily have happened if the flood in Genesis did happen. And the arguments against the young Earth, I think the hardest one is probably the question of the stars, that the stars are absolutely insane amounts of distance away, and it would take millions of years at the speed of light for the light of the stars to reach us. To which there are possible objections, like the universe is always expanding, so maybe they would have been closer, but I do think that's a hard one for young Earthers to answer. So now the interesting part, why does it not matter? The cause and effect argument is a very powerful one for God's existence, and the argument looks like this. You came from mom and dad, they came from their mom and dad, who came from their mom and dad, back and back and back and back and back. The argument says that the cause and effect cannot go back forever. There has to be something eternal that caused everything in the first place, and we refer to this person as God. And so in the young Earth theory, 6,000 years ago, God takes 6 days out of his week to create everything and then chilled on the 7th, perfectly in line with the cause and effect argument. In the theory of evolution, 13.8 billion years ago, God decided to very slowly create everything. And this is also congruent with the cause and effect argument. Both theories necessitate the existence of God. And this is why modern apologists, they really like the Big Bang Theory, because the Big Bang says everything had a beginning. And if everything had a beginning, someone had to set the beginning in motion. So a lot of modern apologists are big fans of the Big Bang. So both theories are congruent with the cause and effect argument. But neither theory is relevant to Christian philosophy. The Christian philosophy really revolves around Christ crucified, which is love over pride, the selfless over the selfish. God is love, man is prideful, and so God needs to be above all. Being sinful creatures, we are so uncomfortable not knowing how the universe came to be, and we're so uncomfortable with the fact that no matter how much science we do, we're going to be so off from what the truth is about where the universe came from and how it came to be. And obsessing over this and obsessing with gaining the knowledge of all this so that we can have the power and the knowledge to know about all these things, that's pride. And that's why we got too caught up in this debate and why it actually, at a certain point, contradicts Christian philosophy. We need to be worried about love, God, selflessness, instead of look at me and how much knowledge I can gain about this. So the takeaway from this video is, sure, this is an interesting debate, but what's much more interesting is loving everyone as you love yourself.